In case you just joined us, this is the ultimate choice, reaching you from our live television. And of course, in the first segment, we try to look at the election process that led to the February 23 presidential and National Assembly elections, and some of the high and low points where Fineface Nsika helped us to do justice to some of the main and germane issues in that process. But in this segment, he mentioned something earlier, and right now we are going to zoom our lens on it to look critically into the election process and the pre-election process, especially looking at it from the provision of the Electoral Act 2022, which was the guideline, which set the guideline, of course, for the performance of that election process. Joining me right now to have conversation around that, and especially the use of the temporary voter cards. I have been joined by legal practitioner Opatola Victor Esquires right here at the studios to look into some of those taking issues. It's good to have you joining me.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. And it's good to see you again. It's been a long time.
It's nice.
All right, let's go straight into it. I'm aware you are the counsel, representing the plaintiffs, where the ongoing case concerning the use of temporary voter cards to vote in the 2023 presidential election is concerned. And I'm aware that you got a judgment, before the presidential election, sometimes in February, that allowed for people with temporary voter cards to actually participate in that election. I'm going to start by asking, a lot of people seem not to be aware, first of all, of this judgment and this position, and the fact that with their temporary voter cards, they could actually participate in the election that happened on the 25th of February. I'd like to get your view. How much did you do with letting the Nigerian people know about this?
Okay. Actually, the judgment was not given until after the general election. The judgment was given after the general election, which is just last week. So the judgment was given last week, Thursday. So this judgment, basically what it's saying is that, now I'm quoting the page 20 of the judgment now. The page 20 of the judgment stipulates that anybody who has registered to vote, who has fulfilled all legal requirements, stipulated by law to vote, and he has his name and details is contained in the Inec database, and Inec has issued such person a temporary voter's card, that person is eligible to vote and cannot be disenfranchised by the ineptitude, the negligence of Inec to issue such person his or her permanent voter's card. So as it stands today, that is the law, that anybody who has fulfilled the legal requirement on him or her to register to vote, and his name is contained in the INEC database, he has been issued a temporary voter's card and has a voter identification number, is eligible to vote. The judgment further went forward to state that there is no discrepancy, there is no law that made a difference between the permanent voter's card and the temporary voter's card.
Why you say there is no law? It looked exactly like the next question that I was going to ask you. Okay. The Electoral Act 2022 actually authorizes Nigerians to go into the electronic means of voting. Yes. As a matter of fact, it was a bane of contention for a while as to whether we were ready and prepared to go electronic. Yes. But the entire Nigerian people prevailed on the system, and the electoral law actually provided that Nigerians could go the electronic way, in voting. And does this particular judgment not contravene the provisions of the Electoral Act 2022, that says that voting should be by electronic means?
Now, peradventure, what you're talking about is Section 46. Section 46 stipulates that INEC can use card reader or any other technology. This current dispensation, this current election, INEC did not use card reader. What INEC used was the Beavers machine. This is how the Beavers machine works. The Beavers machine verify a voter and accredit a voter. The Beavers machine uses 3 ways to verify a voter. First, it verifies you using your surname. Secondly, it verifies you using your voter identification number. Thirdly, it verifies you using your barcode. Now, these three things I just listed, the Beavers machine can verify you using any of these three things. So it need not be the three of them together. So it can verify you using only your surname. It can verify you using only your voter identification number. It can verify you using only the barcode on your permanent voter card. So what we are saying is that the Beavers does not need the plastic nature of the permanent voter card. The difference between the permanent voter card and temporary voter card is the plastic nature of it. Now you will argue, or people can argue, that there is a barcode on the permanent voter card. That's a plastic permanent voter. There's a barcode on it. Yes, there's a barcode on it. But people that were issued their temporary voter card between 2021 and 2022, that paper slip contains a barcode, which is the same as the barcode that would have been on their permanent voter card. So the barcode can be scanned.
So it inadvertently means that the people that will qualify, even if the temporary voter card is concerned, if it is to be accepted, will be people who registered between 2021 and 2022.
No, it doesn't. Why it doesn't is that people who registered before 2021 and 2022, they can also vote using the temporary voter card because their name is on it. You can use only your name to be verified by the Beavers machine. People that registered before 2021, the last digit of their voter identification number is on their temporary voter card. The Beavers machine can verify you using the last few digits of your voter identification number. So it's not only the barcode.
But would that not have made the process even more tedious, especially considering the time it would take, perhaps for me to start to find out what is your name, how does it spell, and, we begin to talk about that. Unlike when you just have your card and then you give it to the electoral officer and it is inserted and then you move on. Do you not think that is like taking us a bit back, in this journey of moving electronica, where our election process is concerned?
It didn't take us a little bit back. For people that voted in this election, some persons will even tell you that their plastic voter identification number was almost useless for them because basically what they did was come, verify using their surname, just put it on their details will come up, or use their voter identification number, the last few digits, not the whole digit, just the last few digits, put it on the Beavers, their details will come up. After verification is accreditation. If you have been verified that you are on the database of INEC, then you'll be accredited. The means through which you're accredited is through your thumbprint. No person has the same no two persons have the same thumbprint. So you can use your thumbprint to accredit you to vote, or they can use your facial to accredit you to vote. So the long and short story of this is that, one, there is no major difference between the permanent voter's card and the temporary voter's card. Both of them contains information that a voter, any intending voter can use, can be used by the Beavers to verify any intending voter in order to vote. That is the decision of the court.
Oh, interesting. I'd like to know a little, since you said that the judgment was actually given after, the presidential elections in February. What process, led to this judgment? I mean, this judgment is from the Federal High Court, I want to believe, that you couldn't achieve it, especially at the presidential election. And now the governorship election is just a few days away. And the Nigerians even hardly know about it. Is this case, is it really worth the attention of Nigerians, or what can be done expressly, to ensure that this that has been achieved, this judgment, is passed down to the Nigerian people who have temporary voter cards and are not aware that they are also eligible to vote?
Now, this case is a landmark case in the electoral jurisprudence of this country. That means, first of all, that a lot of people who have been disenfranchised through no fault of theirs can now vote. That means a lot of people can participate in the election, which will confer even more further legitimacy on the government that emerge from this process. Now, The reason why this judgment is coming at this particular moment in time, which was last week Thursday, was because in order for you to file this kind of judgment, there's something called locus standa. You need locus standa. Then your locus standa will not have arisen if the window to collect your permanent voters card is still on. For instance, INEC closed collection of permanent voters card on the 5th of February, and this matter was filed on the 7th or 8th of February. So in order for you to file this matter, it will have been obvious that INEC has closed collection of permanent voters card and you cannot get your permanent voters card. In order for you, that is the locus standi, in order for you to be able to sue in the court that so far you can't get your permanent voters card, the court should compel INEC to allow you to use your temporary voters card, because there is no difference between the permanent voters card and temporary voters card. The only difference is the plastic nature. And the plastic nature would have mattered if what we're using is the card reader. But we are not using the card reader. The card reader does not function like the Beavers machine. The card reader, you slot in the plastic nature of the permanent voter card into the card reader to read the details. But the Beavers machine does not need you to slot in the card reader. What it needs is the information on the voter's card, which is your name, your voter identification number, and the barcode. Any of these three things, the Beavers machine can use any of these three things, your name, your voter identification number, and the barcode, to verify you in order to vote. So it doesn't need the three of them to be complete. Just one of them will suffice to verify you.
Okay, so how do you think this judgment is going to aid the governorship elections and state house of assembly elections that will be coming soon? How much is this going to impact, especially where voter turnout is concerned and participation, in the process? Do you see it actually increasing the number of participants, like we had the low turnout in the presidential elections?
Yes. Now, first of all, let me state that for INEC to allow the use of temporary voters card in this gubernatorial election, it will cost them nothing. It will not cost them additional technology. It will not cost them additional staff workforce, because there are people in the presidential election who voted using their temporary voters card. This is not secret. It is all over the social media. It is, on that particular day, there are people who particularly called me to let me know that, they voted using their temporary voters card because they understood the fact that we were in court during this period. So they told me that they voted using a temporary voters card.
But is that not a breach, on the law, especially
It is not,
since this judgment had not been granted at the time, and it was, people didn't even know. I mean, the expectation and the information everybody had is that except you have your permanent voter. And I remember that prior to the election, and these questions were raised about whether people could use their temporary voter cards. And, it was clear that people could not, that what they could use, or people who were eligible to vote, were those who had their permanent voter cards.
Yes. The INEC chairman came out to say, but some persons voted using their temporary voters card to vote on that particular day. Now, this is the issue. Let me tell you the argument of INEC. The argument of INEC was that, in court, was that the INEC guideline stipulated the use of permanent voters card, and that the law has given INEC the powers to make guidelines. But we argue that the guideline cannot supersede the enabling act or the Constitution. If the Constitution does not stipulate or make any difference between the use of temporary voters card and permanent voters card, the guideline cannot impose on the enabling act, which is the Electoral Act 2022. And the court heard in our favor. Now, what I'm saying is that the stipulation of INEC in its guideline that it is that permanent voters card or nothing was practically declared null and void in this particular judgment.
Okay. Well, I asked you before, I'm going to ask you again.
Yes.
Is this going to impact on the governorship election, especially because you are aware now, and maybe I am aware, but we have millions of Nigerians who do not know. Yes. Is this going to make any significant difference since people don't know?
Okay. It will not make significant difference if people do not know. That is why all of us should take it as a responsibility, first of all, to place a demand on INEC to follow the judgment of the court. So this judgment is the law. It is valid, it is subsisting, it is the law. So we all should first place a call, a demand on INEC to follow the judgment of the court, follow the rule of law, follow the dictates of democracy. Do not sabotage democracy.
Well,
That is the call we should place on INEC.
it comes at an interesting time that we just had, a similar scenario in the country where you had the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of Nigeria, give a verdict regarding the old 1,500 naira note. The Supreme Court ruled that the old notes be returned and, maintained within the system till the 31st of March. But you realize that both bankers, road users, and many Nigerians that we even spoke with on our live television, could not accept it. And we could see it even on the roads, that this legal tender by court declaration, was not legal tender because money is in exchange.
Yes.
And do you not see this same scenario playing out, especially in this case, where the temporary voter cards is concerned? The court has given its verdict, but the apprehension of the people, the uncertainty of the people, about whether this will help, about whether this will hold water, about whether appeal court will rule differently, about whether this case might even get to the Supreme Court, and then we'll be getting a verdict, which, certainly, like you said, will not happen within within the next few days. Do you see, adding all of this together, how do you see it turning out to affect, this judgment that has been passed, in favor of the temporary voter cards?
Okay, what happened during the CBN matter when the Supreme Court gave its verdict is what is called executive rascality. Because when the court gave its verdict, it gave its verdict directing the federal government. What the federal government ought to have done is to direct the CBN as an agency of the federal government. It is executive rascality. What the people were not, the people do not discard the Supreme Court decision. They were waiting for the Central Bank of Nigeria to give a directive and the federal government to give a directive that our earlier position is no longer valid due to the decision of the Supreme Court. It is the directive that the people were waiting for. That was why they were not collecting the old Naira note. But as of yesterday, actually, me as an individual, because I had certain old Naira note, 1,000 Naira or thereabout, that I couldn't spend. As of yesterday, people were collecting this old Naira note from me personally as a person, because the Supreme and the CBN has come out to say banks should accept the old Naira note and it's still a legal tender in this country. Now, in this particular situation, the resemblance will only be if INEC refuse or deliberately decide not to give a public statement in regards to this court judgment, and deciding that they will follow the court judgment in this gubernatorial election, pending when there is a court of appeal decision upturning this judgment or upholding this judgment.
Okay, well, understanding that, institutions are a bit independent, like you have...
There's no independent...
Like you have, hold on, like you have the Independent National Electoral Commission, like you have the Central Bank, and each of them have the rules, guiding them. And most of the time, you get to hear the players come out to play by, they tell you they're playing by the rules, that is provided for them. The Independent National Electoral Commission also has certain rights, for example, where election jurisdiction is concerned. And this law has been passed at the moment. Do you see them actually abiding or obeying this court order that has been given? And in the case where they do not, are you going to file another case to, continue to challenge the Independent National Electoral Commission in court?
First of all, if INEC fails to allow the use of temporary voters card in this coming gubernatorial election, it is automatically in contempt of the law. And all these things speaks towards the fundamental concept of free and fair election. Now, recently, there is a democracy ranking all over the world. Nigeria was nowhere to be found. It is all these sort of things that culminate into ranking all over the world. Now, the credibility of INEC is in question if INEC refuses to allow people to use their temporary voters card to vote if they refuse to follow the dictate of this judgment. The implication is that an institution that is meant to uphold the law, uphold the fundamental principles of free and fair election, is also the institution sabotaging
the process,
sabotaging the rule of law, sabotaging electoral jurisprudence in this country.
All right. Thank you, Barrister. Time is fast spent, but I'd like you to talk to the Nigerian people at the moment. Some of them are not aware that they can vote with their temporary voter cards and that there's this kind of judgment at the moment. So I wanted to talk to them, especially in light of the governorship elections and where it appeals, where it connects with their conduct during the elections. We know what the law says, but in the first segment of the show, my guest spoke about all the irregularities that the different people from different parts of the country, got engaged with. And you see, these are not people who are within the system. They are not an agency. They are individual Nigerians. So I wanted to speak to, the use of temporary voter cards with respect to the attitude of people, in these gubernatorial elections across the country.
Okay. Dear Nigerians, recently, a judgment was given by the Federal High Court, which allows the use of temporary voters card for those who have their temporary voters card and have not been able to get their permanent voters card. This judgment was given in regards to two individuals. But the principle of this judgment applies to millions of Nigerians who have their temporary voters card but does not have their permanent voters card. The principle is this: everybody who has registered to vote and fulfilled all legal requirements and their name is contained in the Inec database is entitled to vote using their temporary voters card, because there is no major difference between the temporary voters card and the permanent voters card, except for the plastic nature of the permanent voters card. But the Beavers machine does not need the plastic voters card in order to verify a voter. There are three means or ways in which Beavers machine can verify a voter: through your surname, through your voter identification number, and through the barcode. Now, if your temporary voters card does not have the barcode, you can still be verified by the Beavers machine using only your surname or only the last few digits of your voter identification number. So I would say you do two things. First of all, join in a clamor to demand from INEC to ensure that people are able to vote using their temporary voters card in this gubernatorial election that is coming in the next few days. And second, you yourself can go and vote using your temporary voters card. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much, Barrister Victor Patola, for your time on the show. It's been a wonderful time having this conversation with you.
Thank you very much.
All right. It's been a wonderful conversation with Barrister Victor Patola right here in the studios. We were talking about the use of temporary voter cards in the governorship elections coming forth, especially drawing from the background that the Federal High Court in Abuja has ruled that the temporary voter card is valid and should be used or could be used during the election process. So in case you do not have your permanent voter card but have your temporary voter card, do well to ensure that whatever part of the country you are where voting is taking place in your state, that you do participate in the electoral process so that we can have a democracy that is a democracy indeed, that is by the people and for the people. Thank you so much for joining us on today's edition. I'll come your way again next time with more interesting subjects concerning Nigeria, concerning the world, and everything politics. Till then, keep watching our live television. I am Olubinga George.